Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie. This is where I talk about knitting, my tips, my tricks, my opinions, and my preferences. And, oh, my nose itches. I love sock knitting. And all year long, I was planning this big month of October, dedicate all my videos to sock knitting. Socktober extravaganza. You'll notice it's not October right now. Well, life happened. Had a small calamity in my life. There's a live stream about it. But you know what? Socktober doesn't have to just be in October. Socktober can be any time of year. So for November 2021, we will be having Socktober. And my first video for this Socktober in November is going to be on the Afterthought heel. This heel is so neat because it allows you to knit the cuff, the foot, the toe of the sock, and then at the very end, knit in a heel. This technique is really great for color work because it allows you to knit the body of your sock pretty much uninterrupted. Also, knitting an Afterthought heel, because you're knitting your heel as the final step, you utilize a separate supply of yarn, which means if your heel wears out, you can cut out that heel, replace it, knit a new one, and the rest of the integrity of the sock is maintained, which I don't know, I just think that's really cool. And finally, I love the Afterthought heel because you can work this heel the same whether you're working cuff down or toe up. And to me, that just makes it a very versatile heel. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and let's knit an Afterthought heel. Before we jump into the video, just a quick reminder that down in the description box, you will find timestamps to various parts of the video so that if you need to or want to jump around to some important information that you're looking for, you can easily do that. I always hope that you'll watch through the video at least one time because you never know what little tip might be thrown in or just a funny moment, whatever, but life is happening and sometimes you gotta just get to the goods. Speaking of the goods, down in the description box, you will also find a list of materials that I utilized for today's video, and many of them will include a clearly marked affiliate link. If you click on one of these links, it'll take you to a shopping website, and if you make a purchase, I might then earn a small commission, and these commissions help support my channel and this community. If you utilize one of my affiliate links, thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated, and if you don't, that's great too. I'm just glad that you're here watching a video. According to Nancy Bush's book, Folk Socks, which is a classic sock knitting book, she says that the Afterthought heel has been found in socks that have been made in the Middle East, the Ukraine, and the Balkans. So there is kind of a deep tradition of knitting your tube and your toe of your sock first, and then going in and knitting the heel after everything else is done. This was actually the first sock I ever designed, and it's a mosaic pattern. I really wanted to be able to knit the mosaic pattern uninterrupted, meaning that I started at the toe. This is a toe up design, and I actually knitted a short row toe. I then moved into my color work, and when I had the length of my foot, I then, for back here, where 50% of my stitches are, I knitted in a row of scrap yarn. So when I knitted this sock, I knitted this on magic loop. So my working yarn was back on this side. So I then just slipped all my stitches back over to my left needle and then was able to pick up my working yarn and continue knitting the color work, which I did up until here. After I was done knitting the body of the sock, I was then able to take out that scrap yarn, unzip it, pick up the live stitches that remained, and I knitted in my heel. Now for this sock, I did utilize a short row heel as well to mirror my toe, which meant that when I was done working my short rows, I did have to graft all of the stitches onto the back of the cuff. One of the neat things about an Afterthought heel is there's actually a couple of different ways that you can go about knitting the heel. And today I'm going to show you a technique that allows for maybe a little bit of a better fit, but also allows you to knit your heel and not have to graft any stitches. So here I have a little sample, and full disclosure, this is not going to be a true sock. But this will take us through the process of making a afterthought heel. It'll be more like a little booty in the end, I think. Before we actually start doing the afterthought heel, we actually have to make a few decisions, unless of course you're following a pattern where the decisions have already been made for you. There's like 3 questions you're gonna need to answer. One is how many stitches of your sock are going to comprise your heel stitches? 2, when are you going to insert your scrap yarn for your heel? And 3, where on the sock do you want to place your heel? Traditionally, 50% of your stitches are used for heel stitches. However, one thing about the Afterthought heel is that it is a shallower heel construction. And oftentimes people who have a higher instep don't care for the fit. One thing you can do to adjust the sizing of an Afterthought heel to accommodate a larger instep or a higher instep is to knit more stitches for your heel, meaning instead of 50% of your stitches being utilized for your heel stitches, going up to 60%. Personally, I have a pretty average instep. I have a fairly narrow heel, so I stick with 50% of my stitches for my heel stitches. By the way, that is just one way that you can make an adjustment to the fit of an Afterthought heel. We'll be talking about some other ways that you can adjust the fit for the Afterthought heel later on when we're talking about actually working the heel. If you are at all familiar with short row heels, the fit of a short row heel and an Afterthought heel, I think, are very similar. So where I like to start a short row heel is actually the same place where I would insert my scrap yarn for an Afterthought heel. And if you have the fish lip heel pattern, that pattern gives very specific directions on how to measure your foot and where to measure your foot to decide where to start your short row, because the fish lip heel pattern is a short row heel pattern. If you have that pattern, you can use those same directions to determine where to place your scrap yarn for your Afterthought heel. But the basic placement, I think ideally, is if you are knitting from the cuff down, you would insert your scrap yarn for your heel stitches once the cuff reached the bottom of your ankle. If you're knitting from the toe up, that means that you would insert your scrap yarn once the foot had reached the back of the ankle and you're almost to where you would start a heel turn. In terms of where to place the heel on your sock, commonly heels are placed so that they are centered over the join in your round, and that way the join in the round is at the center back of the sock. This is considered traditionally a very discreet place to place a join in the round, especially if you're working a pattern where there might be a noticeable jog in the work. But another place that you can always position the join in the round is into the inside of the leg. And that's what I tend to do when I'm utilizing an Afterthought heel. And the reason is because then I just have to knit half my stitches near the beginning of the round, and then the join ends up to the side and it's all hunky-dory. And so for a right sock, I would knit my scrap yarn for my heel stitches on like the first half of my stitches, and then for the other sock, to keep that join to the inside of the sock, I then knit the heel on the second half of the stitches. So with those decisions made, I'm almost ready to insert the scrap yarn into the knitting for that eventual heel placement. But I'm going to do one more thing to set up that's going to help me later on when the scrap yarn gets removed. Putting in a lifeline is going to help me pick up stitches later once I remove the scrap yarn and start working on the heel itself. So I just have a little bit of crochet thread here, and this works, whoops, very well as lifeline. One thing about this, I want my join to be on the inside of my foot, but I don't want to place my scrap yarn in the first stitch of the round. I just think that it's a little bit of an awkward placement for the heel stitches. I'm going to place my lifeline starting at this second stitch from the join and just insert that into the next 20 stitches. These stitches are really tight. All right, so I'm having some difficulty getting this lifeline in. So I'm gonna actually take a smaller needle and slip my stitches onto it because my stitches, these are plastic needles and my tension on these needles are just really tight. This right now is 20 stitches, but because I'm skipping this first stitch, I'm gonna slip this last stitch on. So I'll have 21 stitches here. And now I should have a much easier time getting this lifeline in. Here we go. There we go. By the way, spoiler alert, I will be using these smaller DPNs later when it's time to actually pick up these stitches. So yeah. So now that I have this lifeline in, I am all set up to start knitting the scrap yarn into the sock. You want to use a yarn that is the same weight as the yarn you're using to knit your sock, but this is scrap yarn that will be removed later, so ideally you utilize a slippier yarn. Cotton is ideal, acrylic can work very well. You just want a smooth, slippery yarn for your scrap yarn. As I said, I'm not going to work the scrap yarn into this first stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and just slip this for now. It will get worked once we go back to working with our working yarn. And now I'm going to just knit across with my scrap yarn the next 20 stitches. Notice I didn't slip my stitches off of this smaller needle before working these heel stitches. The thing about knitting is it is your right needle, the one that you wrap your yarn around, that sizes the stitches. So you can have your stitches on the left needle be a smaller needle and knit off of it and not affect your gauge. We'll just put that to the side. We will come back to that needle actually later when we go to work our actual heel. So now I have all of my heel stitches worked with the scrap yarn. What I'm going to do now is return to my working yarn. Now, one of the nice things about utilizing DPNs or two circular needles when you're doing an afterthought heel is getting back to your working yarn is really simple. You can just slide your stitches back to the other side of the needle. If you're doing magic loop or you're knitting two socks at a time on the same needles, you're going to have to slip your stitches back to the left before you can start working with your working yarn again. And now I can just start working my sock again in pattern as though I had never stopped to knit in the scrap yarn. And I'm going to just finish this round of knitting. At this point, I am now into the foot of the sample. So here is my cuff, here's where my heel stitches are, and I've just finished the first round of the foot. Again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert a lifeline into these 20 stitches where the scrap yarn is. Again, this is going to help me later when I remove this scrap yarn and I have to pick up stitches. Again, to make this easier, because I've learned from last time, I'm going to slip these stitches onto a smaller needle so that I can more easily insert that lifeline. So now I have a little lifeline in. But at this point, I am now just working the body of the foot. Now, one thing about the Afterthought heel is I do think it lends itself very nicely to toe-up socks, because with toe-up socks, you start with the toe, you start knitting the foot, and you can try on your sock around your foot to test that it is long enough to reach the heel. For a cuff down sock, the foot is a little, I hate to say trickier, but it's a little trickier with the foot, because when you get to knitting your foot, you're going to have to measure the length of your foot to where you would start your toe shaping. The most accurate thing to do, though, is to measure your foot from where you would start your toe shaping to the back of the ankle, where your heel would start on the bottom of your foot. And you would, knit that length and then start your toe shaping, and you should be good. If you want to be super precise about this, you can always take your row gauge, the number of rows that you knit per inch, multiply that by that length that you've measured out, and that will tell you how many rows that you need to knit before you start your toe shaping. Like, I've knitted like 3 rounds now of my foot. Something I'm gonna do at this point, and this is just to set me up later when I get into the toe shaping, is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to slip this first stitch of the round and not knit it. And I'm changing the beginning of my round. This way, when I do my toe shaping, the heel lines up where I want it. It's just a small thing to do, and it's only because I did place my heel just 1 stitch from the original join. So yeah, at this point, I'm gonna just keep knitting around until I've gotten the foot as long as I want it, and I start the toe shaping. And then once the toe shaping is done, we will be ready to go in and take a look at how to knit the actual heel. Here I have my completed sample. Right now it kind of looks like a very small thumbless mitten because I used like this wedge toe here at the top, and my heel is nicely placed across the back. So now what we have to do is remove this scrap yarn. We are going to bring back the tiny needle for this. In fact, I'm gonna need 2 of them. We're not gonna knit the heel in these tiny needles, but we are going to use these tiny needles to help get these stitches up on a workable needle so that we can reintroduce our DPNs. So there's 2 ways that you can do this. If you have these lifelines, you can go ahead and just remove the yarn and then put the stitches up on the needle. You can use your regular DPN if you want to. It's just much, much easier if you use a smaller needle to do this. Or you can do what I'm about to do, which is I'm actually gonna take the smaller needle and I'm gonna follow the lifeline in, and I'm going to put these needles in to the stitches, thusly. I'm putting the needle into the behind the right leg of each stitch. And doing this will make it easier when I do take out that scrap yarn. Okay, so I've got those stitches on my needle. I'm gonna take my second skinny needle here, and I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna turn my work upside down. And right here, I wanna pay attention to where my scrap yarn is coming out. Right here is where my scrap yarn is coming out. That's where I'm gonna put my needle. And I'm turning my work upside down so that I can see these upside down stitches as I do this. All right, now that I've done that, I can start unpicking the scrap yarn from the work and open this up. So I'm gonna just pull this out. If you wanted to, you could very carefully cut the scrap yarn out, but I prefer just pulling it out like this. Feels safer. Don't have to worry about accidentally cutting my actual work. And you can see it's starting to open up. It's kind of like magic as this happens. It's kind of fun watching the knitting open up as you remove the scrap yarn. Voila! I now have all of my stitches up, and I have this opening here that you can see, and this is where my heel will be. And you can start to see what the shape of the sock is like, but we actually have to knit in the heel. So that's what we're going to do next. Traditionally, with an Afterthought heel, what has been utilized is what's called a peasant heel. And frankly, the peasant heel is worked the exact same way as you work a wedge toe. So if you know how to work a wedge toe, you know how to work a peasant heel. And all you would do is divide up your stitches evenly on your DPNs, and you would start working a wedge toe just at your heel. Another option for your heel is to do like I did for this sock here and use a short row heel. It's kind of fun if you like working short rows like I do and you like short row heels. You could really enjoy this for an Afterthought heel. The drawback to this is you do have to graft stitches onto the body of the sock at the end. So this heel I'm going to show you is one that Laura Neal has in her book, Sock Architecture, called the thumb joint hat top heel. A couple of neat things about this. It's called the thumb joint because you start the heel just knitting plain rounds for the length that's equal to the length between the tip of your thumb to the joint, thumb joint. And what this does is it creates more depth in the heel before you start the heel shaping. The second half of the name, which is the hat top, it's called that because you shape the heel similar to how you would shape the top of the hat. So it gives you a nice rounded heel, and it allows you to close the heel the same way you would close the top of a hat, and there's no grafting required, which I know for some people is a huge, huge, huge plus. One of the neat things too about this heel is it works really great for a bullseye heel. So if you are knitting a set of striped socks with self-striping yarn, you can take that self-striping yarn, use it on your heel, and you get that really neat bullseye effect on your heel. So this is kind of a very cool variation of a heel for an Afterthought heel. So let's get into how you actually work it. So first thing, as we get set up to knit the actual heel, I have them right now in these much smaller needles, but of course I've got to get them up on my actual DPNs. And at this point, I'm feeling very safe that my stitches are okay. So I'm removing the lifelines just so they're out of the way. And we're gonna just start knitting with our regular DPN. So I'm gonna knit my first 10 stitches, and I'm gonna use this contrasting yarn. One of the really fun things with these type of heels is it's very easy to do a contrasting yarn. So hey there, Editing Carrie here. So I had a technical problem and lost the overhead camera for this portion of the video. So I reshot it. And what you're about to see is something very different from me, which you'll only be getting the overhead and some voiceover from me, which, you know, I don't love that way of doing videos, but it was kind of like my best solution to an unfortunate situation. So yeah, don't worry though, my face is going to pop up later in the video, but for right now, enjoy this lovely overhead. Enjoy this lovely overhead footage of me starting the thumb joint hat top heel. Okay, so here I am in the reshoot, and I had already gone ahead and put my stitches up, divided them between my DPNs. Back here, I have 20 stitches, and here I have 19 stitches. And this happens because I knitted from the cuff down. Those are my regular stitches on those two needles. And back here on these needles are my upside down stitches. But it doesn't matter because I am going to be picking up stitches along the sides of the knitting right here, not only to help me get back up to the proper stitch count, but also to deal with some gaps. Because the one thing about this heel is you'll notice that here and here there are no stitches, and that's just the nature of the Afterthought heel. And if I were to just start joining everything in the round, I would get holes. So you can sew up those holes after you've completed the heel, or you can pick up stitches in the edges there to close those gaps, which I will then decrease away as I continue on with the heel. Which means that as I knit this first round of my heel, I'm not going to worry about my stitch count because we'll get to the final stitch count after we picked up those stitches and then on the next round decreased the extra stitches away. Okay, so I'm coming up here to the first place where I need to pick up stitches, and I'm going to eventually pick up 3 stitches along the edge. And I'm going to do these as if I were doing a make one. So the first place I'm going to pick up a stitch is in the running thread that is coming out of the stitch I just knitted into. So I'll lift that up from the front and then knit through the back leg. That will twist the stitch, which will also help close the gap. The next place I'm going to pick up a stitch, it's a little tricky to see here on camera, but there's actually this column of stitches right next to the running thread that I just worked into, and I'm going to pick up the right leg of that stitch right there. And I put it in the wrong spot, so I had to bring my needle to the front to pick that up and then knit through the back leg. And at this point, I like to pause and just take a look at the 2 stitches I picked up and evaluate if I'm really avoiding any holes. Last, there is another running thread that's coming off of the stitch, that first stitch of the needle. I lift up that running leg and do the make one there. So I've increased 3 stitches into that side, and that is going to bridge the gap that existed. And at this point, I can go back to knitting my round of stitches. So I'll just knit across until I get to the next place where I'm going to have to bridge the gap. Okay, so I'm here once again at where I need to insert some new stitches. And I'm really going to be doing this the same way I did previously, which is I'll find the running thread that is coming off the stitch that I just worked into, lift that from the front and knit through the back leg to twist the stitch. Then I'm going to go into the right leg of the actual stitch next to it and pick up from the front and knit through the back leg. And then again, find that running thread that's coming off the first stitch on the needle on the left, pick that up from the front, knit through the back leg to twist it. And I now have all of my stitches picked up, and I have stitches to bridge the gap, and I should be good to go, except I need to find out how many stitches I actually have so I know how many stitches to decrease away on my next round. So I just go ahead and count across my stitches by 2s, and when I was finished counting, I had 45 stitches all together. For this project, I want to get back down to 40 stitches, which is a number divisible by 8, which will be important later. So I needed to decrease evenly 5 stitches. To figure out how to do that, I simply took my total number of stitches, 45, divided that by 5, which is 9. Then I subtract 2, which is 7. So I knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and do a knit 2 together.
And I repeat that all the way around. So at the end, if I counted all my stitches, I should have 40 stitches, which I did.
Now I've joined my work in the round, and I'm going to just knit a few rounds of plain knitting until my heel is as long as the tip of my thumb to the joint. Here I am, and I've knitted, let's see, whoo, almost lost it. Here I am, and I've knitted 5 rounds, and I measure, just putting my thumb down, and yeah, about the tip of my thumb down to my knuckle there, and that is plenty long enough for me. I'm now ready to start doing the heel shaping. Basically, for the hat top shaping, every other round, you decrease 8 stitches away evenly until you get down to 8 stitches altogether, at which point you close up the heel just like you would the top of a sock. Okay, so it's very straightforward. To do the math is a very simple formula. You take the number of stitches that you have. Hopefully you have a number of stitches that divides evenly by 8. I have 40 stitches, so 40 divided by 8 is 5, and then you subtract 2. So 5 minus 2 is 3. So I'm going to do a knit 2 together every 3rd stitch. And I will be able to decrease 8 stitches away evenly. 3, knit 2 together. The reason that you subtract 2, by the way, is when you're doing decreases and you're decreasing evenly, basically you subtract away the 2 stitches that are involved with the decrease. 1, 2, 3, right? 4, 5. So knit 2 together. I should do a whole video on just decreasing evenly because I used to do it wrong all the time. So I'm done. So I should have 8 minus 40, 32 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Arrgh. This tail. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So I have 32 stitches. I decreased properly. Yay! This next round, I'm just going to knit a plain round. And after the plain round, I'll do another decrease round where once again, I decrease 8 stitches away evenly. Now, last time I decreased every 3rd stitch. So this next decrease round, I'll decrease 2 stitches away after every 2 stitches. So I'll knit 1, 2, knit 2 together. Then I'll knit a plain round. Then the next round after that, I'll decrease another 8 stitches evenly. So I'll do a decrease after every 1 stitch. So it'll be knit 1, knit 2 together all the way around. Another round of plain knitting. And then I will have a round where I will knit 2 together all the way around.
And at this point, I have so few stitches left that I changed my setup from a 5 needle setup to a 4 needle setup.
And at this point, I'm done with my heel shaping. So now I'm going to close this up. So I'm going to just cut my yarn
and thread up a tapestry needle so I can
close this up like I would the top of a hat.
So I'll just run my tail here through these last 8 stitches. And then once that thread is through, I can cinch it all together.
So if you really hate grafting, you might like doing a heel like this, where you just close up the heel like you would the top of a hat and no grafting involved. You can do this sort of thing, by the way, with toes as well. Like, and whoop, don't know why that. I just close that up. And I got a little loosey there, but that's okay. I'm gonna just run this through another time just to make sure that this is good and secure. And there we go. There's the end of the heel.
So we're back to the reshot overhead. Again, technical problems, but I wanted to show you what this finished heel looked like. And you can see here where I picked up those stitches, I did avoid the gap. Now, right in there, the stitches look a little wonky right now where I did do some of the pickups, but by taking my tapestry needle and just sort of futzing a little bit with the legs of the stitches to loosen up the tension in some places, tighten it up with others, I can get that looking much better. And then once it were blocked, it would really work itself out very well. If I was still very unsatisfied with how it was looking there at those corners of the heel, I could always go in and do some duplicate stitch to perfect the area even more. Just messing around a little bit with my tapestry needle, I think I got a really lovely heel here in the end. No gaps, a fun little swirl in the heel. So yeah, I think this is a successful heel in the end.
I really do enjoy this heel. I find it quite fun to make. If you want sort of a low-key, easy sock project, it's kind of nice to be able to just cast on some stitches at your toes, work the sock all the way up, go to a point where you're like, yep, that's a long enough foot. I'm going to insert some scrap yarn, continue knitting up, and then insert your heel after the fact. And again, there are different ways that you can construct your heel. You can use the peasant heel, which, like I said, is the exact same shaping as a wedge toe. You can use the type that I showed today, which is the thumb joint and hat top heel, or you can use a short row heel. They all have their pros and their cons. Of course, nothing is perfect. There are drawbacks with the Afterthought heel. Like I said before, people who have a higher instep sometimes find that this heel is not as comfortable. It doesn't fit them as well because it is a shallower heel. But at the end of the day, this heel is a great heel to consider whenever you're doing color work, stripes, or you're knitting socks for kids and you know those heels are going to wear out quickly. You can just pop that heel right out and pop and knit a new one in, which is a really cool feature. So now I have questions for you, which is, have you tried an Afterthought heel before? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you have any tips or tricks for doing an Afterthought heel that I did not talk about today? I don't know everything, and I learned so much from all y'all whenever you comment on a video. So it's great having conversations with everybody about these knitting techniques and what kind of things that we enjoy and what we don't enjoy. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your knitting friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos, all lets YouTube know that this is a space we're checking out. And if you have not already, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Hitting the notification bell will make sure that you get updates whenever I upload a new video or start a live stream. Okay, that is it for me today. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy crafting. Bye. So basically, you have knitted far enough around that you are up past the, why am I blinking? High instep. Okay, these 20 stitches after the first stitch of the round. So now I have this Lifeline in and I am all set up to start working the scrap yarn into the sock. It is called the thumb joint top hat top. It's called the second part of the heel name, which is the hot tap top. So that is the Afterthought heel with a thumb joint and hot hat. There's a lot to cover with an Afterthought heel. Oh my god. Oh, by the way, I always forget, at the end of the video, if you want to watch more videos by me, there will be a couple of video suggestions. You click on one and we can keep this party rolling. Of course, if you're busy and gotta go, that's great. I'm still here on the YouTubes and you can always hit subscribe. Last chance, there's a little picture of me in the corner. Hit subscribe, click the picture. You can subscribe to my channel and that way I'm always showing up in your feed. Okay, final plug is done. I gotta go eat some lunch. Oh my god, I'm hungry.